Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Reminder, you should be completing the notes in your note packets while you're watching the video. So today we're going to use those theorems we talked about yesterday to try to use them in proofs. So reminder, our first step in proofs is to make our two columns. We're going to label it statement and reasons. So our first statement we have here is that angle 2 is congruent to angle 1, and angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And that's what we're given. So since we're given that, that should be number 1, not 2. So since we know 2 is congruent to 1 and 1 equals 3, we can say that 2 is equal to 3. And that's just our substitution. So now if we look at our drawing, if we know 2 is equal to 3, we can say that ST is parallel to UV because those are on opposite sides of our transversal, which would be TV. Those are angles that are formed by TV and ST for 3 and VU for 2. And they're on opposite sides of my transversal. So that means those two lines have to be parallel because the alternate interior angles are congruent. So that means alternate interior angles congruent imply the lines are parallel. And that's all there is to that proof. So now let's take a look at our next one. So I want you to start by setting it up. So statements and reasons. And the first thing we know is 1 is congruent to 3 and 1 is congruent to 2. So I want you to pause and think about what that tells you. So if 1 is congruent to 3 and 1 is congruent to 2, that tells me that 2 is congruent to 3. And that's our substitution property. So we knew 1 was congruent to 3, and we knew that 2 was congruent to 3. 2 was congruent to 1. So that means what's really important for our problem is what we just said, is that 2 is congruent to 3. So now if we're looking at the 2 is congruent to 3, we see that they're both on this line FG. So FG is our transversal. And the other lines that make up these angles are EF and GH. Well, EF is really part of BF, right? So it's that longer line. So if I'm looking at these purple lines and this red line, they make up angle 2 and 3. So since they make up angle 2 and 3, I'm looking at the relationship that there is between 2 and 3. So 2 and 3 are in the same spot. So that means those two lines have to be parallel. And what does it mean when they're in the same spot? Pause and try to think of that if you need to. So when they're in the same spot, that means they're corresponding angles. So if my corresponding angles are congruent, that implies the lines are parallel. So please make sure you filled these notes out in your notebook, or not in your notebook, in your note packet. And we'll work on the classwork tomorrow in class.